Kingdom One fam, welcome back to another podcast. My name is Nick, I'm your host, and here on this podcast, we want to make sure that as a ministry leader, you stay encouraged, healthy, and effective when it comes to the ministry that you do, because we understand it's complex. You're dealing with a lot, from staffing to budgets to the felt needs of your congregation. We get it. And if there's anything you need, you can always drop us a line at hello@kingdomone.co. Today's podcast, I'm talking with Jose from Rescue a Generation. And to be honest with you, Jose has such an amazing anointing on his life. He is taking some of the hardest students and teens from one of the toughest school districts in America. Their next step, if they don't straighten up, they're going to juvie or prison. And he is not only transforming their lives with really great understanding of what it is to come out of poverty, but pointing them to Jesus and seeing them get set on fire and a new trajectory in life. And so there's a methodology here I want you to tune in on. It is very, very different from the current mainstream way that churches are doing things. And I believe Jose is onto something very, very great here. I want you to tune in to this podcast with Rescue a Generation. Jose, would you be able to tell the Kingdom One audience about Rescue a Generation, your mission and your vision?
Yeah, thanks for that, Nick. Rescue a Generation is a faith-based nonprofit organization located in the Inland Empire mainly. Our mission is to see cities transformed by providing coaching, empowerment, and the gospel to this generation. In essence, we have three major things that we do. Ultimately, we want to rescue a generation, and we do that through life coaching students on school campuses who are struggling with behavioral issues. We do that through the empowerment portion is through our school-wide assemblies, and then our two faith-based conferences that we do every year. One is called Manhood Camp, where we're bringing these inner-city young men for an overnight stay on a college campus, where we talk all things how to be the man God's created you to be. And then we have an urban youth conference called The Takeover, where we bring a lot of these under-resourced, underdeveloped youth workers, youth pastors, and students that come from urban backgrounds and have a state-of-the-art youth conference designed for them. But our real thing is we want to share the gospel with the generation. We just want to earn the right to do it first. And one of the things that we see a lot is the assumption that we have the right before we've ever earned any access. And so we work primarily on school campuses, and we'll tell schools to give us up to 30 of your more challenging students. And we spend 10 weeks with them in what we call a success club. We walk them through success principles. We life coach students. And all life coaching is, I know that word is used a lot, but in a sense, we ask a lot of questions to help discover what belief systems are keeping kids back from being successful. So we would say something along the lines that we believe belief always dictates behavior. And so when you look at a kid who has, poor behavior, poor grades, truancy, etc., belief always dictates that. So what's the belief about themselves? What's the belief about school? What's the belief about teachers, adults? That ultimately is, contributing to the student not performing well. And if we believe we can uncover the belief system, you can change the entire behavior of the student. So in a sense, like that's kind of the overview and the heart behind what we do. We genuinely want to reach the least, the last, and the lost kids that are far from God, that are probably not walking into Christian clubs or, church doors, yet they're required to spend time with us through our intervention program. And we get to love students really, really well. So we do have several values that are really, really important to us. One is transformation. We would say transformation is the name of the game for us. We want to see kids go from death to life, from light to dark, from poor behavior to good behavior. And so that's a really big component for us. Dignity is another one. We think every person is actually a single stroke of genius. And how do we see that, spot that, identify that, especially some of these students who don't feel like they have a lot of dignity? There's a lot of kind of these other labels that they're given. And so how do we honor them in such a way and see them the way that God sees them? And then hope. There's no power like the power of hope. You can have the most adverse circumstances in life, but if you have just a glimmer of hope of what's possible, we believe it can give you the power to really see that transformation. And then consistency. We think how you do anything is how you do everything. And the one thing I think students need more than anything in this generation is the presence of loving adults consistently. And how do we be present for them? How do we be consistent for them? Ultimately, in the work that we're doing. So, really, some of the things that we value that really kind of shape all the work that we do on the campuses. But I mean, bottom line in a nutshell, I would just say we believe in this generation. I know what stats say. I know what, a million young people are leaving the church every year. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying in all of that, there is a generation that God has his eyes on and that I believe that we are uniquely equipped to reach in a way that can see a lot of change in a group of young people. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about us. I would just add this to our whole journey and our story. We started in 2016. If I could just bring you to where we are, we're very young, I would say still. We were very grassroots up until 2021 when COVID happened, the floodgates opened for us. And the way I like to talk about this, I feel like we built an arc in 2015 and we started to like test it out 2016, 17, and 18. And when COVID happened, there was a flood that came and people were looking for refuge, help, particularly with students who were struggling. And we had already created a system. And so in 2021, we scaled pretty drastically. We went from 2 schools to 23 schools in one semester, and from 23 to 37 the next school year. And so the need for the work that we do is literally in every city in America. We just happened to position ourselves in a way that when the need arose, we were ready to answer the call. And God's been really good to us through the journey so far. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about us and our mission, our vision, and what we value, and how we got to where we are today.
That's amazing. That is really, really cool that you were able to build something that is able to scale and just the growth. That is phenomenal. Do you have any stories of student life change? I would love to hear about maybe a specific student or a group of students, or just even your area. I would love to hear, what you have to say about that.
Yeah, and well, stories are vital. So I'm gonna give you some stories, and then I'll give you some stats that we've been tracking over the last couple of years. That people are always asking, does it work? Can you prove that it works? I would say when we first started, when I would go to a principal and I would ask the principal what they felt like did our program work or not, they would say things along the lines of, there was that one student in our class that was giving that principal a headache. And, they were in the office all the time. They were cussing out their teachers. And they started to see the change in that particular student. So one student that comes to my mind is a guy named Castro. We were on a campus, first time in the group. This kid named, his Castro is his nickname, but this cat named Castro, he comes into the classroom and in the middle of the lesson, he stands up and he kind of just like, makes himself look real buff. And he starts to kind of walk the classroom, kind of trying to show us that he's like the big guy on campus. Like he kind of runs the show here. And Castro for the first few weeks, man, gave us a headache. And not me personally, but one of our coaches was just like, oh man, like he wasn't like disrespectful. He was just doing small stuff. He just wasn't really up for the conversation that we were having. And one of our coaches, he sat down with Castro one time to have just a conversation over lunch, and he had a sandwich, and he actually offered Castro a sandwich. So like, hey, do you want to eat this? And that really did something for Castro. Like that one sandwich, like kind of broke down a wall in him realistically. So Castro is this kid who's wreaking havoc on this campus. And he became the MVP of our success club. And when I say MVP, it's the kid we see the most change in. When I went back and asked the principal what he thought about our program, he said, well, before your program, Castro was always suspended. He was always getting into fights. He was trying to get on the sports team and couldn't do it. By the end of our program, he had a complete behavior change. He was respectful to the adults on the campus. He was actually doing his work. And he actually got on the sports team that he was on. Well, fast forward, not necessarily through us, but Castro also found faith. So by the end of it all, he was carrying a Bible to school. And so we just got to see this really like radical turnaround in Castro. He's somebody that we still talk to. And we have several stories like that. I'll give you one more, then I'll give you kind of some of the stats that we've seen. When we first started, a young lady named Brianna came into our program. She was suspended 9 times in 2 months. And I mean, that's a short window to be suspended 9 times. And so she gets in our program. The first few weeks, it's the same thing. She's a little rough around the edges. We're trying to get her to really like understand what we're doing. Well, by week 3, we have a conversation in our program around pain and really is about like how to properly process pain. And what we see all the time is that one of the common denominators for students who are really struggling is trauma, it's pain, it's hurt of somehow, some sort, and it comes from somewhere. Well, that conversation, something shifted in Brianna, and she started to kind of pay more attention, engage more. By the end of the 10 weeks, her mom shows up and her mom comes into the class as we celebrate her, because we do a big celebration at the end of the 10 weeks because these students are not the students who are getting Student of the Month awards or like, and so we honor them. We have a certificate for every student who completes our program. That dignity conversation is a big one for us. Well, her mom comes in and her mom is crying at the celebration. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe she's just proud of her daughter. Maybe she has like, well, here's the reason her mom was crying. Her mom said, no, I'm actually crying because I missed the principal here. And I thought, well, that's ironic. And I said, what do you mean you missed the principal? And she said, well, before your program, I was on the school multiple times a week because Brianna was in trouble. And so I got really close with the principal. And she said, by about week 3 of your program, I haven't been back on the campus anymore. Well, Brianna was a 7th grader when she got into our program. Brianna just graduated high school last year and had never been suspended again since she got into our program. Brianna and her mom's relationship was really, really rocky prior to our program. Her mom tells the story of their relationship now is a complete 180. And we have a video of this, and she says, Brianna is my person now. Like they go everywhere together and they do everything together. And so, Nick, I used to call our program a secular program because we're not necessarily sharing our faith in the program. And I had a professor from Cal Baptist, he corrected me. And he said, your program's not a secular program, it's a redemptive program. He said, when I look at this story between Brianna and her mom, I see the redeeming power of Jesus connecting a mother and a daughter again and to see where they are. Like that's the work of the gospel. That's Jesus' work that we get a chance to partner with him in. And so and then at a large scale, we learned really fast that, if you're gonna do this at a large scale, stats matter, data matters. You have to capture the numbers. And so the first year that we had that large, growth, that one of our biggest districts is 18 middle schools and high schools that we serve in that district. They ran some data for us after that year, and we learned this through a meeting with the statewide superintendent here in California, and they said we saw a 24% decrease in chronic absenteeism from kids that went through our program. And so recently we reran some numbers. We found that 69% of middle schoolers that went through our program had an increase in their attendance on school campuses, and there's 50% of high schoolers had the exact same thing. And so what we found is our program is actually working, and we're actually seeing progress and results in the lives of these students. And then for us, we want to build these relationships with these students that matter and earn the right to invite these kids off the campus. Because if we can get them off the campus to one of our events that we do, that's where we can actually share the gospel with them and introduce them to Jesus. And that ultimately is the end game for us. We want to share the hope of the gospel with young people.
I love how you talk about earning the right to share the gospel. And I think that might be a key change. Can you talk about how ministry has changed and how this idea of earning the right, what are you actually doing in order to get into these young kids' lives?
Great question. Yeah, so when we talk about ministry changing, it's really interesting. In college, when I was in college in 2006 and 7, I read a book by Ron Luce, who, used to do these Acquire the Fiery events and just, I mean, really a legend in youth ministry. And in the book back then, Ron Luce said that there would be 4% of this next generation who will become Bible believing, like followers of Christ, right? So have a biblical worldview. Well, fast forward, uh, 12 years later, the Barna Group does a study, and the study says 4% of Gen Z have a biblical worldview. And so when you talk about Christianity, specifically in America and the church, it's a very interesting subject because we're not as much of a Christian nation as we would like to be, or as we would even think that we are based on stats with young people. That's all I'm basing that off of, not going back to the history or anything, but based on stats with young people. And so if that's the case, how do you win the loss? Well, you don't win them through argument, and you don't win them through, you know, necessarily making them do something. You win the loss through relationships. And Jesus modeled this really, really well. And so I'm going to walk through really fast this model of Jesus that we have we really believe in. If you walk through the book of Matthew, like kind of chronologically, you see in Matthew chapter 4, Jesus calls Peter and says, "Hey, come follow me, and I'm going to make you fishers of men." And so right there is like the beginning of this relationship that he's starting with these disciples. You go right after that, you go into the Beatitudes. So there's a lot of teaching, there's a lot of conversations around the kingdom of God and what's happening. Well, in Matthew chapter 10, this is the first place where you see Jesus actually empowering the disciples. So he's actually getting them involved in the work that he's doing. They're actually going out 2 by 2 to cast out demons, and they heal the sick. And so it's not until Matthew chapter 16 that we see a salvation type conversation happen. And Jesus asked the question, "Who does man say that I am? Now, who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, he responds, "You're the Christ, you're the Messiah." Jesus then responds to him and says, "Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you." Such an interesting situation here because immediately following that, Jesus starts to say, "I am going to go to the cross." And Peter's initial response is, "No, you're not." And here's the first place we see Jesus rebuke Peter. He says, "Get behind me." All that is in Matthew chapter 16. And so here's the synopsis of that. Jesus does life on life relationships from Matthew chapter 4 until Matthew chapter 16. Now, there's a lot of time in there, but that's relationships. He doesn't ask what they believe until Matthew chapter 16. And unfortunately, in our modern day Christianity, we reverse the order. We want you to believe before we ever allow you to belong. When Jesus really modeled was belonging before believing, relationship first, and then we have a belief conversation later. And I don't correct behavior until I can first identify your belief in the conversation that we're having. And so that happens literally in the scriptures of how Jesus models discipleship. So I don't think there's a way ministry has changed. I think Jesus has been doing this for a really, really long time. I just think somehow we got the order reversed. So we would do the altar call, we'd ask you to believe, and then we want you to join our small group. Well, I'm actually saying you could probably disciple people into the faith if discipleship wasn't only for believers. And so that's kind of our approach is how do we build relationships first and earn the right to share the gospel with somebody later on? Let's have a belief conversation later. Doesn't mean we don't want to have it, doesn't mean we won't have it, but how do we do 12 chapters of Life on Life? And let's talk about things that matter to you and what's important to you and how are you growing so that we can have that belief conversation later on.
Kingdom One fam, I want to hop in here real fast and just let you know that the Grow Together conference is officially here. You can go to growtogether.church to get your 2025 tickets. We're going to be having our conference May 7th and 8th in Rancho Cucamonga at One and All Church.
Hey everybody, this is Jose from Rescue Generation, and I am so excited to share with you that we have partnered with our friends at Kingdom One to bring you Grow Together 2025. This is an amazing opportunity for all of us who serve in youth ministry. Grow Together is a space where people can come from all over to learn practical ways that we can impact our community. I will be sharing topics on how to reach students on school campuses, effective communication 101 for this generation, and ultimately how to go after students who are far from God. Can't wait to share this journey with you. Don't wait. Register today at growtogether.church. Let's come together, learn from each other, and go make a real difference in our world. I'll see you there.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And I love how you kind of democratize discipleship. Like everybody can be invited into this process. And I think that's a great strategy for reaching more students. And so I guess my question to you is that scaling period. Could we talk about that? How did you find the staff and what are some criteria that you're looking for in finding these mentors or these people to come alongside these young individuals? What is something that you're looking for in either, the staff that are coming alongside or even other partner ministries?
Yeah, great question. So for us, what we didn't realize when we started this was that schools actually have budget to pay for programs like ours. That was not knowledge that we had initially. I was a missionary raising support, and I was just kind of going hard like the Young Life model and like help us be on these campuses. Well, when we tapped into the intervention program and really going after kids who are really struggling, and we started to see the data that it actually works, well, we realized schools have budgets and they charge us. And so I had a pastor ask me a question, and he said, "What keeps you from going completely secular?" Like, well, because the temptation could be there for us to be like, well, let's just take the gospel out of our mission statement, or, you know what I mean, for the sake of opportunity. And like, and my answer to him was the local church is the key to us staying fully faith based. We hire current or ex youth pastors, youth workers, people that have a heart for young people, are plugged into a local church, and want to be on campuses. And so those literally are our criteria. In a perfect world, if God was to blow our minds over the next 5 years, then we would be in cities across America and we would get youth pastors because we tap in the school budget. We would get youth pastors paid to be on campuses and doing the work that we're doing. So you wouldn't be able to go in through a Christian club, which is fine if you want to do that. But through the work we're doing, you would have an intervention program. And these kids are required to be in our program, which is why we're limited in being able to share our faith in the context of our program. We're not an after school program. We're not a during lunch club. We are an intervention program. So they pull kids out of class for us. And so, there are some laws around what we can share and can't share. But man, in a perfect world, we need to partner with local churches so that way, ultimately, the church can have access to a campus, can love a school really well, can have the influence on the school campus. Number two, that the students, once that relationship is built, have a place to go outside of the campus where they can hear the gospel. But ultimately, number three, we genuinely believe the local church is the key to just all that God is trying to do in our world currently. And we think churches need to be involved. Somebody said it like this: God called all of us to be fishers of men, and fish always travel in schools. And if we're going to go fishing, we got to be on school campuses doing the work. of discipleship with young people. It's a little bit of a different, innovative approach. But I'll just tell you this real quick story of a church we partnered with here in San Bernardino. We just could not have we could not have paid for this story. The youth lead on this particular campus, church campus, starts coming to our success club on the school. He was really great. He was awesome and a lot of great energy. Connected well with several of the students. Some of those students started coming to his youth group, which was phenomenal. Um, that's one thing to get those numbers to translate. I'm also a fan of just loving kids where they are, right? Even if you don't get the number or the tally on your attendance roll. I also know church and I know what we're trying to aim for, and like getting people in butts in the seats matters, right? So but he got these kids to start coming. Well, I will never forget he texted me a picture and he said, "You won't believe it. Not only has the kid come to the church, but their family came and they just got baptized here at the church." And so this young well, actually there's several families, two of the kids particularly that came, but this one young lady actually really found a family outside of the school context and has brought her whole family to church. For us, man, that's what we're called to do, right? We want to bridge that gap between schools and churches. We just have to be very strategic in how we do it, because we're also trying to go after kids that probably wouldn't show up to the Christian club if we went that route. And so, yeah, it's one of those stories that we saw. And we've also seen kids come to our big event because the churches come to our big event. So when we do our two conferences that we do, churches bring their groups. And so some of the same kids that saw us on the campus came to those events. And so you really are just able to share the hope of Jesus with them in a new way. If that world works in a perfect cycle, right?
That's awesome. That is so good. And I love hearing what you're looking for. And it's pastors, it's youth leaders, it's people who are seasoned Christians who are going to get in there and really just love kids. And that's awesome. Final question for you. If you had a time machine and you can go back to your younger self, what is the advice you would give yourself about Rescue a Generation? What would be that encouragement to yourself and also just to other ministry leaders who might feel that they're in the trenches right now?
Oh man, that's a really good question. My thought is this: I wish I understood the concept of being a solution to a problem as a youth pastor. When I was early on in my youth ministry days, it was all about my program. It was all about my small group. It was all about what I was doing. It was all about, you know, come to me, come to like, and where I started to see the shift in even in my youth group context was when I went from making it about programs, so I made it about being a solution to the community that I was in. So the whole curriculum that we teach, I wrote it. And I wrote it because I live in a city that was the second poorest city in the nation, second to Detroit. It was the largest city of its kind at the time to ever file for bankruptcy. And so poverty was everywhere. I didn't write this curriculum because I thought it was going to be this dope curriculum that we were going to go and like use all over the place. I literally thought to myself, man, I got kids that are struggling with poverty and it's affecting their mindset. How do I tap into that? I just felt like you can change their mind, you can change their life. And so I wrote it's a curriculum now, but I wrote 15 lessons as if I was preaching something and 15 talks around poverty and around success and around principles that you can apply to your life now that can help you overcome these obstacles. And in me doing that, what I didn't realize was that I was becoming a solution to a problem. I think this. I think before anybody had an opinion, people have a purpose. And the purpose that God has given us is to be a solution to a problem that we see. Now, other people are going to be a solution to a different problem than I am. And that's perfectly fine. In the grand scheme of things, if you was to ask Rescue a Generation, what problem are we trying to solve? is poverty. And it comes in several different types of ways, shapes, and forms. It's not all financial. There's spiritual poverty. There's relational poverty. There's a poverty of affection. There's a poverty of will. There's like studies around like different types of poverty. And so when I look at the work we do, if Rescue a Generation works now, then we'll be able to look back and say we solved an issue. And what we did was we helped to remove poverty out of the lives of students. And if we do that, we give students a hope at ultimately getting rid of the greatest poverty, which is an absence or a lack of peace or of shalom. And if we can give students shalom, man, I feel like we've accomplished the mission that God has given us. And so I wish I knew that early on, man. I was running and gunning and I'm preaching my face off and I'm like, come to my church and like, let's recruit people. But all reality, if I would just be a solution to a problem, people need support. They need help. People are hurting. How do we go solve issues from a church perspective so we can be a greater support and resource to our community?
Kingdom One fam, I'll be honest with you. There was some moments in this podcast I got really teary-eyed. I was just really choked up because hearing these stories of life change is so important. It is the reason why we get up in the morning, why we grind it out, why we deal with difficult people, is because we hope that one day the light bulb comes on. The Holy Spirit fills somebody's heart and they start to see Jesus Christ as Lord. And in those moments, it's so important to understand that not only the work that we do is it worth it, but it's worth it for us to stay healthy, to continue to work through the longevity of it all. I want to let you know Grow Together Church is a conference for you and your team to grow. It is going to be an amazing time, May 7th and 8th at Rancho Cucamonga, One and All Church. You can go to growtogether.church to sign up for you and your team today to stay inspired, to stay encouraged, to stay healthy, to stay effective. That's growtogether.church. Guys, I am so glad you made it all the way to the end of this podcast. Two things for you. One, if you're ever dealing with anything and you just don't know what the next step is, if you need somebody to talk to, if something has come across your desk and you don't know where to turn, you can always email us, hello@kingdomone.co. We would love to help you. If you're ready to get started with some services in HR, finance, business administration, or marketing and communications, or education for your staff through our academy, we would love to hear from you. You can drop us a line at kingdomone.co/get-started today. That'll sign you up for a consultation with one of our team members. And we just want to chat with you, get to know your ministry, and get you on the path to courageous, healthy, and effective ministry. Thanks so much. Until we chat again, let's grow the church together.